So first off, thank you for allowing me to speak. This is an opportunity for me to talk about the project. So if there are individuals or family members who are still have missing, they know where to turn to. We can help them. We can advocate for them as well. Another thing is I do not like to present. I want to make this interactive. So I would welcome questions while I speak. So I want this to be an open discussion more than me just speaking to the audience. So there's a lot to be to learn today, but I hope that you can enjoy this presentation because it means a lot to me and it means a lot to my team. I forgot the, oops. Yeah, okay, found it, thank you. Okay, so as Dan said, I'm Charles Konsitsky. I'm the Associate Director at the UW Biotechnology Center. I'm also the team lead for the UW MIA Recovery and Identification Project. So a little bit about our mission is we honor the sacrifice of the brave Americans who paid the ultimate price for our freedom. Our primary mission is to recover missing U.S. military personnel from past global conflicts while we educate students and communities on the importance of the past national service and help bring closure to the families of the missing. Who are we? We are a blend of faculty, staff, students, and volunteers. We're primarily on the Madison campus, but we also have individuals from UW-Milwaukee, UW-Oshkosh, and some of the other academic institutions that we've been working with. And also alumni and external volunteers. Here's a few pictures of us, and I know the Woobins are in, so Ryan is in your upper left-hand corner, so you can see that you saw him here. But this is us in the field. We are working 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. This is not a vacation. This is a mission to find somebody or material evidence to help with the case. So we were founded in 2015 after the successful recovery of PFC Lawrence Gordon. I'll talk a little bit more about that case and how difficult it was. And then we're independently the first academic partner to partner with DOD in the summer of 2016. Where we were the first, now they have over 90 partners, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We've had 4 successful identifications recoveries. As Dan stated, we had PFC Lawrence Gordon, Frank Fazekas, Buster Stone, and Henry Stevens. We've also performed 2 scouting missions. One is ready, which I'll talk about a little bit here. And then also, we were in a support mission this summer in 2024 because the mission we were supposed to be on, negotiations between country did not work out. We're located on the Madison campus. I invite you to come and visit if you ever have the ability, or if you're on Madison or in Madison, please stop by the War Room. This is a secured environment as we are working on cold cases, but I welcome you and I can give you a tour of the suite as well as the labs. But as you can see, we have a few students working there. The student volunteers, I don't really care about their background. The only thing I care about are 2 things. 1, heart, 2, drive. They can have an economics background. They can have a MBA, med student, archaeology, history. That would help. But it's about heart and drive with this mission. And we're located in the Biotechnology Center, which has 56,000 square feet of wet lab space. And we're using a lot of these technologies to help advance, which I'll talk about as well. So why? We're bridging students and staff with military veterans and family members. It is educating them in a way that you really don't get a face-to-face value when you're working with family members on cases. And you can see the emotion that they have from years and years and years of heart loss. And this is passed down from grandparents to parents to them as great nieces, great nephews, and they're telling their stories, and we're there to help and hopefully provide closure. We're also educating, influencing people's lives through investigating, composing, giving insight, and then that closure. And might I add, Sam Soderberg is next to Frank Fazekas, the son of Frank Fazekas, who I'll talk about a little bit later. Why else UW-Madison? As many of you know, the UW-Madison campus actually grew. Majority of its population came from a World War II population boom. And then also we have the interdisciplinary backgrounds of anthropology, archaeology, history, geography, geophysics, biology, engineering, medical, and business. And then technological, where we're using eDNA and aDNA, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then innovation with field equipment, machine learning, and AI. We also have our campus military connections. As I stated, the growth came from World War II. We have Camp Randall, Memorial Park, and then also Robinson Map and Geospatial Data Library. I don't know if anybody is a map person like me. I love maps. Robinson Map Library has probably the largest collection of World War II German maps than anyone else in the world. And then Campus ROTC and student veterans, which we're connected with. The project also teaches students problem solving and leadership skills and the value of volunteer service. We're helping train the next generation of leaders that will utilize the skills gained through the project and exemplify the Wisconsin idea. And that's my team on the bottom right there in Belgium. So the Wisconsin objective. Right now, there are over 80,000 U.S. service members still missing to this day from World War II and on. Of that, 1,500 are Wisconsinites. So if you look at the DoD, when they're selecting cases, simple math, we have less than a 2% chance of a Wisconsinite being selected. The primary reason for my project, moving Wisconsin cases forward. We do help DPA on their cases, but they focus on a national level. So it's typically a non-Wisconsinite. As I said, Wisconsinites have less than a 2% chance being selected. So our focus is Wisconsinites. This is where they were located prior to departure from their families. This is not a Madison problem. This is not a Milwaukee problem. This is a state problem. And it takes a state to move this project forward. And you can see the different services. So you can see how, Milwaukee, yes, is definitely highly impacted, but also is superior. So currently we have about 74 Wisconsin cases that we're investigating. Of that, 36 are moving forward positively. We have one prepared for a recovery mission. We have 3 sites prepared to be scouted, and we have 3 disinterment requests in at this moment. And I'm onboarding Papua New Guinea because of our 32nd and other Wisconsin National Guardsmen who fought there during World War II. And we're also preparing a scouting mission here coming up shortly. And I won't disclose those cases because they're in process and we don't want to give a family member a false hope that we may find them. So this was our Wisconsin case that we were investigating, and we finally scouted it in October of 2022 from a donation from the VFW at the state level. This one Wisconsinite started with just that individual. To investigate the situation, you have to understand who was all lost in that crash. So there were 12 others on that flight. Then you have to understand the event of what occurred. Then you investigate the other 3 crashes nearby, or other 2 crashes nearby. So that one Wisconsinite has turned into 23 MIAs that we're moving forward. And we found the site. We have material evidence. We're just waiting to be able to excavate that site and perform the recovery. As I stated, this was a project that came from donations from the VFW. I received no state funds. I don't receive any university funds. The university supplies me space and a little bit of my time. I have a full-time job on campus. So this is a job of heart and volunteer from everyone who participates on this mission, or on this project. So we're driven to, solve a monumental problem. As you can see in the upper left, every community is impacted. The issue, every day passes, we lose eyewitnesses, we lose battle buddies, we lose individuals who have information regarding that case. And much work is to be done. You can see this is where all of our Wisconsinites are located right now. Pacific, Europe, transport routes, they're all over. And then, so we're applying this, and we're taking new approaches as well. And some of these new approaches are eDNA, environmental DNA, and I'll speak more about this, and aDNA, ancient DNA, machine learning, and field equipment development. So eDNA is using the environment to understand what is in that area at that moment in time. So we can take, as you can see on the left, that's our DNA statue or a water fountain. We can pull out DNA from soil or sediment in a dry or aquatic environment and determine if human remains are nearby. And this is an actual chart of human remains that were found of a body. So this is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with full skeletons. We're dealing with parts of skeletons. As I stated, we can do it on a terrestrial, left side, aquatic, right side. And I'll explain this a little bit more, so y'all are probably thinking, okay, what is this? So environmental DNA is, so what we do is we take, rather going to a site and excavating it, which costs hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, possibly. Especially in aquatic, ships like this cost about $500,000 just to be in the water for a week. Where we take ships like this, and we can go there, and we can find where the airplane is, and then we can plan for coring. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. But here's an actual site that we've worked, and we are working right now. I'm not going to state where or what, but you can see how degraded this environment is. This is an orthophoto of this site where the plane has been resting there for almost 70 years. So you think the plane is degrading, the remains have degraded as well. And also what's against us is the things that deteriorate DNA. UV radiation, temperature, shallow versus deep, water, salt versus fresh, and then human contamination, sewage that is being dumped into the ocean or the waterways of these environments. So what we're doing is we're going to go in, and you see these plots? We're going to core, we're going to take samples of sediment soil, and then we're going to take them back to the lab, extract all of the DNA out of it, and then create a heat map to determine if there's a lot of human DNA or no human DNA. And it can be a mapping of knowing where human remains may be. So rather that big ship and you're taking a team to excavate this whole area, which costs about $1 million, this is a much more cost-effective, much more quick focus that would probably cost less than $40,000 to do. Because you still need divers, you need a small ship, room and board, and per diems, etc. So this is the actual plotting of that plane that I showed you. Here they are, pinning the sites for the plots that I showed you, and then here they are extracting the samples. And you can see the cores are right here. And they're just coring into the ground, roughly about 40 centimeters in, about 40 centimeters in, and taking those samples. We take those samples back to the lab, and as you can see, Brent, who is my lead lab tech, is in a gown. So this is a clean room, a 3-phase clean room. So there is 0 human DNA in this room because it's sterilized after every use, and that hood that he's working in is also sterilized. We also triplicate everything to make sure that what we find is true, and then we always have negatives. We perform the extractions, the library prep, and sequence here. And what we're looking for is right here. So when human DNA degrades, the length of it, so when so let me step back. Sorry, I'm going to throw you a quick biology class at you. Who knows how long the human DNA is in base pairs? Anybody? What's that? It's 3.1 billion, well, it's 3 billion base pairs long. Our human DNA is very long. Yep. In a healthy realm, when you're dealing with healthy DNA, it could be in the hundreds of thousands, long, because it does break. But when it's degraded, we're working with around 30 to 40 base pairs, and you can see this line right there. See that right there? 30 to 40 base. That is a perfect degraded DNA. And that's what we're working with. That's what we're looking for. And you can see with this plot, we've got good human degraded DNA right there, which means there's human DNA or human something nearby. Then, as I said, we heat map it. And you can see that heat map right there. Everything else is neutral except right in there, which means possibility. We plot it. Ironically, UW Wisconsin's red. W was red. I didn't do that. That is not for this presentation. It was just by chance that W was red. So there may be a human body over here. When crashes occur, people are discharged, things occur, people float out, bodies bloat. There's a lot of activity that can happen. So with that, we find increased levels on that left wing, which then it's not just one site, it's multiple sites. So that heat map helps us determine, home in on it. So would we go excavate it? Possibly. Would we go back in court again just to test it, just to confirm? Possibly. We haven't decided our next step yet. But then the thing is we're still developing this, so we haven't truly correlated it with recovery yet. So we haven't found actual remains yet from our findings yet. This just occurred not even a year ago. So we're still in the process of developing this. The other reason for eDNA is if you look at this site, you can see all of the little foxholes right here in the old trenches. This is a site in Belgium that is square miles large, where there are losses here. So this is another area where we can home in on maybe the foxholes or the trenches and core around it and determine if human remains are nearby, rather excavating this whole environment. It's just a much quicker, cost-effective approach. The other is mass graves. So a lot of ravines were used for mass graves. Rather, going to a site that has a soccer field on top of it right now, and I'm talking about an actual case, you wouldn't go here and excavate the whole area. What we can do is core down into the ravine where the old ravine was, extract the samples, and then test it for human DNA to confirm that there is human down there or there isn't. Other purposes, as I said, mass burials, open murder investigations. So a lot of this can transition into real world use. So let's say, or a missing person investigation. An individual was killed, buried in the suspect buried the individual in his property, and then saw that the police was catching up to him. He then moved the body. We could extract from that location and determine if that individual was there. And our goal for this is to find the missing. Not just with MIA, but any type of missing. A lot of this is transitioning out. Our focus stays on the MIAs, but this is now transitioning further outside of the MIA realm. So our efforts have brought home 4 heroes. As stated, PFC Lawrence Gordon, First Lieutenant Frank Fazekas, Second Lieutenant Walter Stone, and Staff Sergeant Henry Stevens. PFC Lawrence Gordon's case is the case that kind of lit the flame underneath me. As stated, I'm the Associate Director at the Biotechnology Center. We have a lot of people come in and say, hey, can you do my DNA? And we're like, no, we can't. There's a lot of human subjects issues. We had a gentleman walk in, and he had asked the question, and I had kind of pushed my core director out there to talk to him because I didn't want to. And he started talking about, hey, I'm doing a documentary on my grandfather's World War II unit. There's one MIA. I've been investigating for 3 years. I believe I know where he is, and the DOD won't help me. I just need help with identification. I heard that coming from a large military family, brought him right into my office, and I said, no worries, I'll help you. And we worked with them for almost 2 years on this case. PFC Lawrence Gordon is a very unique case. He was a Canadian who joined the U.S. military because he was working in Montana at the time. He was killed in action in northern France and was buried as an unknown German. So he was in a German cemetery in northern France as an unknown. Talking about one of the hardest cases that you could imagine. We had every country at the table, and DOD still wouldn't work with us. But that's past. They're now working with us. But the family, we had seven family reference samples. All seven mirrored the remains that he had believed were PFC Lawrence Gordon. And I had partnered with the INPS, which is kind of like the FBI in France, and they had the same thing. It was a beautiful success. That was a mission that truly opened my eyes to the efficiencies that we have and some of the inefficiencies that were occurring at that moment in time. I didn't know that we had 82,000 MIAs either. That was a shock to me. So at that moment in time, the Department of Defense was recovering roughly 64 MIAs per year. So I had proposed to them that they partner with academia to help advance recovery missions. We have free labor. I shouldn't say free labor. We have students who volunteer. They want to learn. They're good people. They do. They want to learn. They have heart for this. So I proposed the recovery of Frank Fazekas to them.
Can I ask a question on
Yes, sir.
How did they know? I mean, that's such a American unknown, German soldier, reinterred, but the family knew the local.
No, the family had no clue. It was that civilian historian.
Oh, the historian.
Yeah, and he wasn't even a true historian. He was just doing a documentary on his grandfather's unit, but then learned that PFC was missing from his grandfather's unit and started investigating. And it kind of brought it upon himself to find this individual for his grandfather's unit.
But how do you do that with unknown?
So that's the hard part. This is not easy work. You have to obtain documentations. You have to, I may say acronyms, so just say, hey, what's the acronym? So an IDPFs, individual deceased personnel files, which is their personal file. The problem with that is 76% of that burned, or 70% of it burned in St. Louis in the 70s. So we don't even have that. So we have to sometimes go to the family members and say, do you have any documentation regarding this individual? But then we also get morning reports. The reason why we have a capital call for a microfilm reader that costs $50,000, and people are wondering, why are you getting a microfilm reader that's $50,000? Because the Pacific communications are all on microfilm, and it's hundreds and hundreds of reels of microfilm with information that can move our cases forward. And this is all sitting in storage at a museum and hasn't been touched yet. That is the reason why we're trying to acquire $50,000 for a microfilm reader, because we will have the morning reports, we'll have activity reports, we'll have comms between officers. A lot of this is no longer confidential, so there's a ton of information there. The AI that we're developing, I'm not going to talk about it, but now I'm going to, sorry, because we're developing machine learning and AI to look at PDFs, pull out that information, and put it into databases for us. And this is not like common documentation like this, where it's easy to read. No, this is cursive in old pencils. That the system that we're using is so high tech, and I'm working with the State Department on this. Their lead technician, lead IT security officer is working with us on this because he believes in this as well, that we can pull this data out rather having humans read this material, which will take millions of hours of time. Let's have AI do it and have that pull it for us rather, work smart, efficiently. This is the way to do it. But for him, it was looking at all of the reports. This was a 3-year before he came to us and 2 more years after. Cases take years. They are not simple because you have to look at every documentation. And then when you get to the field for the scout, you got to confirm that there's material evidence because things happen, which I'll talk about in the Fazekas case. So Frank Fazekas, I proposed to DPA in the fall of 2015 to partner with academia. What they didn't know is I already scouted the Frank Fazekas site the summer of 2015 and was preparing for a yes or no. At that moment in time, they weren't ready to work outside of the DoD. And then in December, I said, wait, I've raised enough money. I'm going for Frank Fazekas, either partnering or not, and they did, which was the best move on both sides, academic and the DoD. Frank Fazekas crash landed, and I'll show some images here, in this farm up here. That farm was owned by the eyewitness, Mark Kush, who was 8 years old at that time when Frank crashed into his farm field. To the right of Mark Kush is Frank Fazekas, the son of Frank Fazekas. Prior to me moving forward with this case, I never call a family member on a case because I don't want to give them a false hope. But for this case, it was a test for academia and DoD, and I'd asked him if I could get approval from him to move this case forward. Because if it failed, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I probably lost my job because it cost me $80,000 of discretionary funds that I used, best money I ever invested. But he agreed. The reason is Frank Fazekas, the son, was a combat pilot during the Vietnam conflict. So he understood what loss was. So Frank Fazekas was on a mission and crashed into this field. The eyewitness, as I said, Mark Kush, walked me out to the field and said, he's right here. And I said, that is just way too easy. However, like you and I, we buy insurance for everything, right? Everybody has insurance. My insurance was, I'm not going to go right there yet because I'm spending a lot of money here. So I sent out a team to use GPR. GPR is ground penetrating radar. What it can detect is anomalies in the soil. Where the eyewitness walked us out to and said, he's right here, there's nothing there. And I was like, oh. I said a few words, but I was nervous. Thankfully, the DoD was working with us, and they sent us an image, and he said, hey, take a look. This is a scouting image from a British scouting airplane that actually took a picture. I'm telling you, this is like winning the Powerball because you don't get pictures like this where you have your crash site on an image. And you can see it right there. That is Frank Fazekas' crash site right there. So then what I did is I overlaid it with Google Maps, and you can see it's below. So let's go back to Mark Kusch for a little bit. Mark Kusch was the eyewitness. He was so committed to the recovery of this individual, but he had no idea who to talk to until we showed up at his steps during the year of 2015. Mark Kusch was the farmer of all of this land right here. And he believed that Frank was still north of the road. So he sold all of the other land off, but kept that plot for Frank to be recovered. He wanted to make sure that he would be recovered. The problem is, the train line came in the 60s and moved that road north. Do you think he was devastated? Yes, he was devastated that he no longer had the property because the landowner to the south was he was not as friendly as Mr. Kusch was. However, he did let us on the site, and we did perform the recovery. But going back to Mr. Kusch, him meeting Frank Fazikis' son was probably the best closure that he could ever have. So there's two types of closures here: family closure and eyewitness. Mark Kusch every day would allow us to sit on his back patio. It was a gorgeous house. And we're all muddy. Anybody know about Flanders clay? It's like peanut butter when it's wet. And we were full of it. He said, I don't care. You guys eat here. And every day, he would bring out chocolates to my students, a whole tray of chocolates. I'm like, after a week, I'm like, hey, I don't want to break your bank. He goes, no. That's what we got when the service members came. So you can see how that impact, how that appreciation, that's one of the things that I learned a lot about the French and the Belgium overseas. They have more appreciation, I hate to say, than our own Americans do for our service members sometimes. They have absolutely appreciation for our service members. They will bend over backwards. And I'll tell a little bit more about that. So we finished that mission, and we moved on to Buster Stone. We call him Buster Stone. That's what his family called him, and that's the only way that I ever talk about him. But Walter B. Stone. This case was a unique case because he crashed in a national forest in France, a gated, locked forest in France. The French authorities didn't care. They're like, whatever you need, we will help you. This site, you can kind of see it here, was about 200 yards in from the road. They leveled a whole line of trees down to get to that site. And then they said, whatever trees you need taken down around it, take them down. We cut down 18 trees in a national forest. And the forest manager would come about every 2 days. You need anything. You need anything. And he would mow our area. They were phenomenal. The only thing I want to say is regarding the French and Belgium, they absolutely appreciate our service members. And that summer, 2018, we finished the recovery. We had a small team, 13 of us, and we finished it off in 3 weeks. Staff Sergeant Henry L. Stevens, this is our largest case. This is our longest case. So Stevens' plane crashed on the top of a hill. Right here's the crater. And then the hill goes down that way. So the other problem with this is our last case is the impacts were very deep. They're both P-47s. Thunderbolts, one of my favorite planes ever. I have a heart for P-47s. They call them the Jug. It is like the Jug. It is an outstanding plane. Frank Fazikis' plane impacted that ground so hard, we dug down 6 meters into the ground, 25 meters wide. Stone, 5 meters down, roughly 20 meters. Henry Stevens, not even 2 meters. there was bedrock not even a foot below the soil. So when that impact hit, the explosion, it blew, it had a post-explosion that the debris was all over this area. It was roughly about 350 meters by 250 meters. We were there for 3 years. We sifted through over 964 square meters of soil. Working 3 weeks. In 2023, I myself sifted through over 1,200 screens of soil. As I said, we're there 10 hours a day. We're working 6 days a week. This is not a vacation. This is to find people. And we did. We closed that case, and that was a great case. The eyewitness of this case was Joseph Wagner. He was 7 years old at the time. He would come out every day and just watch us, and I would sit with him, drink coffee. We'd always have coffee on hand because the French or the Belgium love coffee. And he would come out, and we just would sit and talk through translation, my translator, and we had a great relation. Sad to say, COVID stalled us, as you can see, and he passed away in 2020, so I wasn't able to show success. Yes, ma'am.
Or what did you find?
I'll repeat the question. So regarding sifting of soil, you're looking for all materials. So you're looking for bones, osseous remains. You're looking for metal, aircraft wreckage, which we call ACW. We look for any like dog tags, pins, clothes, boots. We are looking for everything that is not normal for that environment. And we can go through piles and piles of soil and find nothing. But that's good because then that means we're at a sterile outside perimeter. So finding nothing is good. Finding stuff, we may drink a beer that night. And typically when we find a 50 cal rifle, we drink beer because it has the serial numbers and it confirms our plane. So in 2023, as I stated, Joseph Wagner, he passed away. It was, and it's hard because you create relations. This is not just a mission for recovery. You're also creating relations with that community, with that family, the eyewitness, or even the local town. Actually, I won't talk about local towns because we actually drank quite a bit of beer at one location that she remodeled her place. So while we were there, so we had great success. So, but it is hard work, and this is where, when we're in the field with these students, I always have a veteran in the field with us because these students, a lot of them have no military relation. So this is the bridging environment where they can ask, hey, why'd you join the military? Why'd you do what you did? I mean, we're out there for 10, 12 hours. This is the best time to talk and have questions, and it's just a beautiful bridge. And this is us in the field. Belgium and France remind me of Wisconsin. I love Belgium and France, and you can see it looks exactly like Wisconsin. And you can see our piles. These are piles of dirt that we've prepared for sifting. And a pile like that, we can get through in roughly 2 hours. I mean, when we have the crew moving, we are working. You can see it's not always fun because look at all that shale. It is not fun, but we do it. And you can see all the buckets lined up, ready to be screened. That I'm right there. It is just the most rewarding thing to do. And then this is the hill. You can see how the slope, I mean, it was one heck of a slope. The one thing I want to point out here, this was a tree farm that we're working in. This is their crop. We cut down 38 trees, and they didn't want €1 because they wanted that individual recovered. But then they'd also bring out honey and apple juice from their farm, which was outstanding. The students appreciated that. But the Wisconsin impact. So has anybody been to the Ardennes American Cemetery in Belgium? If you haven't, I would say go. It is outstanding. In 2019, the missing in action tablet had 463 people with 12 rosettes. A rosette is placed next to the name when they are found. 2 of them were our cases. When students see that, that is the return that they feel. I mean, it's just, there isn't a dry eye, even with myself. I get goosebumps every time I talk about this. But we're waiting for our 3rd one. Because Henry Stevens was just buried in March of 2024, so his rosette is on his way. Thank you.
We have time for questions. Anyone raises their hand and we'll bring you the mic.
Where do your leads come from? And how many, like, what does that pipeline look like? Are there hundreds of leads and they kind of get sorted through and then they end up at you when they get to a certain threshold of evidence, or what?
So there's 2 questions right there. So leads. So leads is kind of 2 questions. One, a lead to a case could be a family member coming to us. And then we start taking that case on. As I stated, I will not communicate with a family member during a case. However, if they reach out to us and they want to participate, we are an open book. We inform them about everything. So that is one way a lead comes to us. The other way is it matters on the relations I have with a country. So I have exceptional relations with France, Belgium, and Poland, as you can see. So we look at Wisconsin cases in those regions. Papua New Guinea, I'm growing right now, and I'm hoping to lock that in because we have a lot of missing Wisconsinites in Papua New Guinea at this moment in time. So family members or relations with countries. Yep. Nope.
Does a country then come to you with eyewitness accounts, or they just know that something crashed here,
No.
or?
No, we investigate it, the case. If we believe we understand where they may have gone down, we then scout. We have to travel there, scout, and we question locals. We look at buried records from the churches. We look at historical documents of the hospital system. So there, you start investigating. You're predominantly out walking around asking questions. And once people hear that you're there, they come out and want to talk to you. Yes, my grandfather told me about this, and this is, or the actual person that helped them. I mean, I can tell you a case where a plane went down, one of the individuals survived, everyone else didn't, but this couple extracted him, took him to the farm, got him to, healed to a point where he could move, and then they relocated him, towards safe zone because it was all German. And they're in their 70s and 80s, and she's walking through the forest like, oh, yeah, you got to follow me. And she's going over barbed wire. I'm like, ma'am, please, you're going to hurt yourself. But you can see how, so it's eyewitnesses, it's documentation. Nothing is very easy in this process, so it takes a lot of work. So
Just,
yep.
Mark, you have a mic there.
Yep. But it's mainly investigate. Yep.
One of the things in Wisconsin where people have been on the land for 100, 150 years, they'll have collections of arrowheads and things that come up during plowing and things like that. Do these farmers and things have pieces that they have found plowing and things, and does that surface in your investigations?
Yes. So it's called unexploded ordnance, and lots of it. Is anybody from the university here? The Fazekas case, we had over 13 gallon buckets full of 50 cal rounds because it was unexploded. We are trained to handle this. We call the students off, we extract it, we move it, and we then put it in a foxhole that's 100 yards away that it has sandbags around. But the problem with that is there's all the other material too, and there are treasure hunters. A lot of these sites are heavily, heavily looted. So we're coming into environments that has already been contaminated, not in a sense of like DNA, contaminated as in like they've completely extracted the motor, or they've taken the dog tags. Everything sells, and that's one of the hard parts. Even in that, the forest, I mean, it was looted as well. But the Fazekas case, that farmer, Mr. Marcouche, kept an eye on that. We found everything. So yes, everything comes up. People actually go out and look for materials as well. It's just we're hopeful that they don't find the primary materials, which are the remains or dog tags, etc.
One of the acronyms you used was the ADNA,
Oh,
and you didn't talk
yeah.
very much about that.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So ADNA is ancient DNA. This is a technique where you're working with very, very old remains or bones. What we're doing is we're using that because it's meant for very damaged DNA. We're now advancing that for working with more current era. So I'm talking like 400,000-year-old bones. We're using those protocols. We're kind of modifying them for World War II remains that have been highly burnt or damaged, or chemicals have been. And what happens is the DNA degrades even worse. So we're using those technologies to help pull DNA out to help us move those cases forward. So ADNA is a type of protocol that we're using to help us with identifications.
You talked about Belgium and France. Now, what has your luck been with the German communities?
German, they work with us hand in hand. It's funny, the Volksbahn is the German recovery unit. We told him about a Wisconsin site that we're interested in. That weekend, he drove to the site, took pictures for us. They're in it as much as we are for them. Yep. Because what we find of theirs, we turn over what they find of us. And it's a great relation. Yeah, the Volksbahn has been outstanding because a lot of their documents, going back to the leads, getting the German reports. The Germans were exceptional at reporting everything. I mean, you can wonder why they lost the war. They were writing reports all the time. But the reports are exceptional because they'll be like, yep, we found Frank Fazekas. We found 3 rifles. Total fact. Because we found 5. Because the P-47 had 8. And they had all the serial numbers listed on it. It was just like, I mean, they were exceptional reports. So we're always also looking at German reports. We're looking at every report that we can get from that location. Yes.
How did so many German military maps end up?
So how many German military maps ended up at UW-Madison? We had a professor who was outstanding and went and bought all of them right after the war because he was using it for geography. And that is the only reason. He also bought, and what we're scanning right now, almost 100,000 scouting images, like the one I showed you, that no one else has. And what he was using it for, geography again. But you can see explosion, crash. So we're in the process of scanning all of these, and then we're going to use a system to analyze where the location is to map it out for us. So it was just, he wanted it for coursework. And how it's paying off right now is amazing.
Are you aware of any interest or attempts in transferring this technology to Holocaust mass burial sites?
Yes, yes.
Question here.
The ravines, that's a good.
Is it true that you could still smell aviation gasoline at some of these sites?
Yes, heavily, to the point where we had to rotate about every 5 minutes because the fuel was so thick. The clay soil. It was the Flanders clay. It capped it so well, and it was interesting because when we got to that location, it was like a black blue, and when we got in further, it was just so we extracted it as quickly as possible and moved it, away. So it wasn't probably a good idea. But we got through it, and it was just that one pocketed area.
What kind of response are you getting from Vietnam in support?
Vietnam, so we're working, our Vietnam cases are primarily working with family members that have come to us. And Vietnam is kind of a focus for DOD, so we don't get much activity in there, but we become advocates for the family members. We help them, coach them along on the process, because working with the federal government isn't easy always, and having the knowledge of what to ask and what not to ask, you can kind of coach them along. Yep.
Hold on.
Yep. Sorry.
A couple of years ago, somebody from UW Madison came up and talked about because they're going down into the state. UW Madison.
Yep.
Led that.
Hawk. So the sequence, we performed the sequencing on that. Yep. He was just talking about the Hawks project, which was a cave. There were how many remains in there? There was quite a bit. And it was just asking if I had worked on that. We did the sequencing for that. Yes. Yep.
I just want to say thank you to you. My dad was a World War II pilot, and he flew P-47s out of England over Germany, 63 missions. He did come back, and actually he didn't speak much about his experiences as I was growing up, as my siblings and I were growing up. But when he got into his 60s, I would say, 60s, 70s, he did begin speaking at veterans groups and other opportunities. But he often told about those times when he came back, but many of the others whom he was friends with did not come back. So thank you.
And this is one of the issues that we deal with, is survivor's guilt, where they don't speak. And thankfully, your father came back, and I have to say, P-47 is, I love that plane. But when working on cases, trying to get information from battle buddies, they won't. It's hard to get them to open up about their cases because of that guilt. It brings up that wound again. They don't want to talk about it. I'm reading a book right now, and I'll throw some books out there here. It's called Tailspin. It's a book written by a gentleman from Viroqua, where he was on a B-17 on the tail end as a tail gunner, and he was shot up. The plane was shot up by Germans, and the tail actually broke off, and he survived the fall and then became a POW. But him telling the story, I think he was in his early 70s before he started talking about it, and then he opened up to this history teacher in Viroqua who then wrote the book. It's a great book, but getting them to open up, they have information. Another thing about information, if anybody has a family member who served and they have their journal, that journal can be a gold mine for us, because they may say, yeah, John Doe died on this day during this fight on Hill 225. So journals are extremely important to us, as well as family letters. We went through one case, over 184 letters, which was heartbreaking for me, because I knew he never made it home. And I could see what he was writing to his parents and how he wanted, to be back home. So letters are also important.
Going back to the soil, that clay soil, does that enhance or not for the remains?
It's a good protectant. It's terrible to work in, especially if it's dry. It's like stone. You have to be very careful with remains because they're fragile. And if it rains, it's like peanut butter. So you don't win one way in clay. I'll take clay any day, though, because I know I'm working a mission. But, sand would always be the best. You see pictures, and the sand is just going through the screens. I've never had that yet. I've had clay. I've had chert. I don't know if anybody has seen chert rock before. It looks like bones. So you're going through every single stone. And then the shale and the rock from Stevens.
I have a question about New Guinea.
Mhm.
Now, I'm sure it was the Pacific Front. You know, were there military stationed there? Was there an like an airport for them, or?
Not right away. So the Ghost Mountain Boys, another great book, Ghost Mountain Boys. Author is from Lodi, and he's tracked the Ghost Mountain Trail. So in Papua New Guinea, the Wisconsin National Guard, who had no jungle training, was thrown into that environment to take that island back. And the Japanese were on the north side up by Buna, but they had to go over the mountain to get to them. It was the most dense fighting. Nobody heard anything about it because the 3rd was marching up Italy at that moment in time. The Wisconsin National Guard fought probably the worst and hardest fight than anyone else during World War II. And that Ghost Mountain Boys book is a great write for just to feel that. And actually, I have all of my student volunteers read that book before they start working on any of my cases, because I want them to understand how intense those conflicts were and how dense those jungles were, that the reason why bodies just, you couldn't find them. I mean, we're working a case right now where we knew we put them underneath, the branches, but the Japs were coming, so they pulled back, and once they finally took the hill again, they went back and he wasn't there. So it's the intensity. And the students, I mean, is it hard? Do you get heartbroken because of it? Yes. But they should feel that so they can understand the reason why they are doing what they're doing. This is not simple. The Ghost Mountain Boys. Yep. And that is, as I stated, an author from Lodi, Wisconsin.
Just a couple comments. Maybe my father, who fought in the Aleutian Islands, might disagree on the hardest place to fight a battle. But anyway, do you know when the term MIA became part of our vernacular?
That's a good question. I don't know that.
Well, I believe it was first used in the World War I. And the reason was, as you well know, most of the war was fought in trench warfare. It wasn't about a lot of big geographical spots.
Yep.
But it was first used when modern weaponry was used to the point where somebody may have been caught in a explosion and there was nothing left.
Evaporated. Yep.
And so they simply used the term. The Army had to do something in terms of telling the parents that they simply said he was missed in action. That's where the original came from.
Interesting. I did not know that. Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the mission? You get a group of students and volunteers together. Do they pay their own airfare? What are the accommodations like? How long is it? I know it's 10-hour days, but how many days or weeks?
So good question. So no, every student that, I've got different areas of volunteers. I've got my cold case investigators that sit in the suite and just do nothing but work their case, investigating, going through documents, reading. So that is more of they just do it voluntarily too. They don't get paid, they don't get credits. This is all heart and drive, what I stated before. The field students, everything is covered. So airfare, room and board, food, travel.
Beer.
I always treat for beer, because they're out there performing hard labor, and I'm telling you, 10 to 12 hours a day. We do have I have a 50-10, so 50 minutes on, 10-minute break, 50 minutes on, 10-minute break, and lunch will be either 30 minutes or 60 minutes, depends on how hot it is outside. And sometimes we take a 2-hour break because it is extremely hot out, and I need them to recover, drink a lot of water. But yes, everything is covered when we're in the field.
And the typical mission is 2 months?
3 weeks to 5 weeks. Yep. 5 weeks can be a little taxing. However, these students will want to work even later. Let's say we find a 50 cal rifle in the ground. they will want to stay there all night long. And I'm like, no, we need to go back and recoup. We can't continue. We need to halt where we are, go back and recoup, and then get back in the field tomorrow. They're just driven. They're good souls.
Here.
I understand that Volk Field was named after a missing soldier.
Yes, Jerome A. Volk.
Has he been found?
No, he is about a mile north of the DMZ in North Korea.
And you can't get there?
No. Not until we have good relations with North Korea, but that isn't anytime soon.
Thank you.
Yep. And I work with the Volk family on that case. I have for many years. Very sad story.
When you find the bones, do you find the whole body?
No. Gosh, no. We're lucky if we find the entire body because of explosion. You got to think so we're working a massive area and we could find fragments, or they could be concaved in the plane and majority of the remains are there. So it matters on the situation. Infantry, it could be the full body in the field. All right.
No whispering.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions or comments,
One
stories?
Another question. You had shown a map of the state of Wisconsin showing that people are from all over the state of Wisconsin that are missing in action. What kind of support do we have from our state legislature to support the efforts representing the entire state of Wisconsin?
I've been to 6 testimonies with 3 sessions for a bill for this project for only $180,000 per year, and what that would cover is part of a historian, a recovery mission, and a scouting mission, and the DNA identification, and it hasn't made it to the floor yet.
And so what could we do as citizens of the state of Wisconsin to support this effort?
So I'm not supposed to get into politics because
okay,
I'm a
that's
state
fine.
employee.
I'll answer the question.
I can't persuade anybody to do
anything.
anything.
On November 6th, we'll find out who our state representatives and state senators are, to look up their phone number and call them and ask them to support this effort when the legislation is being presented. You don't have to say anything.
Yep. Okay. I cannot thank you for that comment, but
just quickly, I looked it up. You can actually listen to Ghost Mountain Boys on Spotify if you have it. Okay. And Spotify as well, yeah.
Yep. I'm going to tell you, it will break your heart, but it is, for these students to understand, it's a great book for them.
Should we? Okay, we're going to move into the last part regarding our scholarship program, but before we do that, thank you so much, Chuck, for tremendous.